Welcome to this episode of the Customer-Centric Retailing Podcast, a forum for retail leaders to discuss industry trends, challenges, and opportunities.
Hi, this is Anil.
And this is Fabi, and each episode, we invite some of the brightest minds in the industry to discuss the future of customer centricity, with topics ranging from the rise of e-commerce, to brick-and-mortar operations, to omni-channel technology, to retail culture, and how all of these elements come together to create customer-centric retailing. Today, we have with us Ronald Thurston, Vice President of Stores at Intermix, author, and a member of the Board of Directors for Goodwill. He has over 25 years of industry experience, and he has worked at organizations such as Saint Laurent, Apple, and Tory Burch. Welcome to the podcast, Ron. It's a pleasure having you on, and I think a real treat for our listeners.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here today.
All right, so before we jump in, Ron, you've referred many a time to your career in retail, which has obviously been tremendously successful, as accidental. So can you just walk us through what you mean when you say that and what attracted you to the retail industry and your career progression at a high level just to get us started?
Of course. So part of the reason that I named the book, The Guide to Celebrating Your Accidental Career, was almost less about my career and more about the very common language that's used and through really the thousands of people I've interviewed over the years, the hundreds of people I've hired. It's a very common experience for a retail career to be accidental. And while I studied retail administration, which was the strange title that my degree had, and I also have a degree in fashion design. And so I didn't know what I wanted to do exactly, but I knew I wanted to be in this business. And I did begin my career in fashion design because I thought that would be the more fun, glamorous, interesting part of this industry. And as it turns out, once I did kind of stumble into the retail side, so I would say it's partially accidental, partially not, because I really wanted to experience retail. I discovered actually the fun, exciting, the best part of our industry is brick and mortar retail. And that's where I've been ever since for the last 25 plus years. But to answer your question, I've had the pleasure of working for what I believe to be some of the most important and influential retailers in our history.
Yeah, fantastic. Such an incredible experience. And we really look forward to digging into particularly your brick and mortar experience, but we want to congratulate you on the release of your book, Retail Pride, which is essentially a guide for any and everyone in the retail industry looking to advance their careers and obviously learn from your experiences as well. So you talk quite a lot about the path that your career took in the book and how you fell in love with this industry. I'm just curious, what inspired you to write this manual for retail professionals? And if you don't mind telling us a little bit about what inspired the cover art as well, as it's quite unique.
Thank you. I think we often reach a point in our lives and our careers where we know we have a unique message. We have a lot of experience. We have a lot to say. And, often a book is that journey. But what was more important than really just putting my own message out is that there is really no resource for brick and mortar retail employees. And I really do believe this, kind of store manager and below. I think once you've become a multi-store leader, district manager, regional manager, head of stores, and the seat I sit in, there are incredible amounts of leadership books and training and resources that you have that make sense. But when I think back to my beginning of my career as a salesperson, an assistant manager, a store manager, and you're really doing the hard work, I really did think back and say, I wish there was a resource or a book or some level of inspiration that could help me understand my work, make me feel kind of validated, if you will, celebrated, understand that this is a great career, even if it's accidental. And so I really took this opportunity to say, I want to provide a resource, a guide, kind of recognition of the work that happens in brick and mortar retail. And so I wrote the book really thinking about them and thinking that this is not about changing retail. This is about celebrating the people that work in it. And the cover is very intentional because I really think about retail as art, and I wanted the cover to be an art piece. I wanted to also be really bright and kind of unavoidable. And that all the colors mixed together is really celebrating the fact that all are welcome. It's such an important conversation because I think that it is often thought about in much more simple terms. And this is not a simple business. And I recognize that it's highly complex and that the art really comes in understanding how it all works together. So I'm very happy with it and the way that it turns out. And it actually it's a photograph that I purchased that I had translated into the cover.
Yeah, I think the cover is so unique, and I love what you said about how it's supposed to be inclusive because the retail industry is so diverse. And you write
Mm-hmm.
in the book about how the retail industry in America employs millions of people and across the world as well, and people coming in quite young and really working their way up. So I think it's great to have a manual like that, again, for people that aren't necessarily in a leadership position right now, that have a lot to learn from you.
So Ron, I'm really surprised but in a happy that you were able to write wrote this book because um, I'm surprised that even though we've been doing this retailing for so long, there's not a real organized content to help people working in the real retail, actually customer facing people. They didn't have a real organized content to learn from and plan out and grow their career. So
Yeah.
I'm sure they appreciate. Definitely, I'm so happy that now they have this resource to go back to. And same for the cover. Actually, it is really interesting. Definitely, I come from a warm country, so we love bright colors. So maybe that's the reason. I don't know, but like definitely, it's amazing cover.
Thank you. I will just add one more thing to that, and that the back is intentionally on the hardcover. The back, there's no text, and that was actually quite controversial with the publisher because you're supposed to put your picture and the book description or like snippets of reviews. And I said, actually, I want the book to be able to sit upside down and look like a coffee table book. It's important that it's taken seriously because I think that the core of the reason that I called it, titled the book Retail Pride, is that the people that work in this industry are often not taken seriously. And that I think that it helps validate the fact that they are doing really important work and changing people's lives and creating an economy and the commerce of the world is so rooted in brick and mortar retail. It's everywhere. It's in every city. It's in every part of the world. And so the relevance of this, to your point, Anil, I did a lot of research and I asked a lot of people and I said, well, what do you listen to? What do you read? What do you pick up? They couldn't answer the question. There's literally nothing. And so getting my voice and point of view out through venues like this I really appreciate it.
You write a lot in your book, Ron, about retail culture, which I think is constantly evolving as the retail industry evolves and also as customer trends and preferences change. So, how would you define the retail culture today, and how would you say it's changed or evolved over the past few years?
Yeah, I think the culture in stores, as the pressure of performance continues to be felt, culture can also feel that pressure, and that there's definitely a push to perform, a push to deliver profitability, and the idea of that you can create culture that's very people centric, service centric, people first, if you will, and using that to make decisions. I think that culture has become more difficult. And so I really push back and say, no matter how difficult it is, and we can certainly say this year put us all in a situation where we had to really define what success looks like, putting culture and people and celebrating our values, celebrating the work that they do, even if they're not generating the revenue that they used to, is what will keep this industry going. And the minute you take the people out of the equation and only look for the results, it's going to create kind of this difficult scenario where it's not as much of a celebrated industry. So I think about, it was much easier to in the past when, and I would say past meaning 10, 15 years ago, when we had a lot more, less e-commerce, more foot traffic, more growth, more all of those things. It was easier to put people first. Today, I think we have to work harder at it, but it's almost more important today. And I think that culture, that conversation, is something that I'm really working through and celebrating as an industry.
Yeah, I know, and this is something, another topic. Maybe we could have another session, but really, it's all about brand should behave like a one brand. Doesn't matter it's a e-com or mobile app or a store. And the experience that customer is getting in the store actually is enhancing, is increasing your revenues online. So really, you cannot say that, well, that's credited to e-commerce. No, it's like, equally credited to the store associates, the people who are working in the store. They are delivering that relevant experience for the customer.
Right.
Just, if you want to test it, if you can dare, close down those stores and see the revenues will fall from that region, if you can dare to do that. I mean,
No question about it. Yeah. And I hope that doesn't happen.
yeah. Yeah.
As I'm sure you know, Ron, the term retail apocalypse has become so overused in the industry, particularly on the back of this pandemic. And it's pulled out every single time a retail Goliath files for bankruptcy or closes down a few stores. And as I'm sure you can tell on this podcast, we believe that the demise of physical retail has been really overblown and exaggerated, and that in fact, physical retail will continue to be a critical component of the buying experience for many years to come. So, what are your thoughts on the evolution of the role of physical retail? Do you think an apocalypse is coming? Or do you think that brick and mortar still has a place in the shopping experience? And what is that place?
Yeah. So that when that term started to become popular in our industry, it really like took me in a very, I don't know, emotionally overwhelming way. Mike, because this is an industry I love and I've worked in for decades. And when I kept hearing this apocalypse, it just never made sense to me because the people I meet, the people I speak to, the industry I work in, that's not how they feel. And they love what they do. And so actually, when I was kind of testing ideas, I started a blog a few years ago to just write some things and to understand the reaction when this really started to happen. And the response was really positive about this message about the future of brick and mortar, and which a lot of that content did become the book. But I think what's missing from the news headlines is, yes, while e-commerce is growing, it was always the smallest part of our industry. If it was 11% to 15% over the last several years, that still means 85% was brick and mortar. And so if you say e-commerce is up 30 or up 40, it's on a smaller base. So it's actually easier to have a bigger comp performance over last year. So you could say, yes, e-commerce is growing at a very rapid pace. Brick and mortar retail has never grown at 20, 30% because the base was so big. So you would say brick and mortar past years up 2, up 3, e-commerce up single digits. Today, e-commerce up 20 to 30, estimating for this year, and brick and mortar down, but brick and mortar is still the largest chunk of it. And so that's what's missing from the conversation. And we could say, well, it's estimated it will grow another percentage point every year the next several years, where it will probably end up being somewhere, by 2024, 82% brick and mortar, 18% e-commerce. So that is huge growth for e-commerce. But to never forget, we still run the biggest part of this, and that there will likely be fewer stores, but the revenue that's generated is still the most significant part of what's happening. And that's missing from the headlines, because the headlines just talk about Amazon and talk about the death of brick and mortar, and it needed to evolve. It was already evolving, but it's certainly a really important and relevant part of our world.
Yeah, in fact, a lot of these, businesses that have closed down in recent past, we can see that, they are not because the e-com is growing. It's because they were not keeping up with the trend and change in customer behavior, the way people shop, and also, the way people now buy things is much different than before, and we've seen that a lot of these digital native brands that started online have actually opened up stores.
Right.
If the stores were not relevant, why would they go open the store? And in fact, they saw the growth only after, much of their growth came after they started opening physical stores.
Right.
So, yeah, so I agree with you. Like, retail, physical retail is here. It's just that it's going to be different, but everything is going to change with time.
Agreed.
We used to learn differently back in the day. We used to read books more. Now we watch videos and audios. And so there's like mix is changing.
Yes. I would reference back my experience at Bonobos, which was originally an e-commerce brand for many years. It was a direct-to-consumer brand. And their story is very interesting because what happened is men kept coming to the corporate office here, it's here in the heart of New York City, and saying, like, can I see these chinos before I buy them? Can I try something on? Can I see it in person? So they were literally coming to the office. And so they built in the lobby of the office here in New York, like a mini showroom. So if guys came in and said, I just want to try them on before I order it, just want to see it. And that evolved into, what today they have, I think 60 plus, showrooms all around in every major city in this country. And they don't sell anything. It's all experience. And it's all, let's try it on. Let's make sure you get the right size. Let's get the right fit. Let's show you how to wear it. Let's get you shirts and ties and sport coats and the tuxedo for your wedding. And let's get you everything, but we're going to order it all on the website. And what happens in that scenario is you're very loyal. You are spending more money. You're coming back more often. You're connected to someone that works in this brick and mortar, for lack of a better word, but they carry no inventory. So it's a low cost build out, but yet at the same time, they're generating significant revenue for the company because then you track, what happens on their journey. And so you can tie back that revenue to the showroom. So other brands are doing this business model today, but Bonobos in the beginning really set that stage and say, you don't have to go home with a bag, but the brand is really important. That experience you have with the brand that you can't have on a website is what's important. So I completely agree with you, Anil. Like the combination of those two is best case scenario for everyone.
Yeah, in fact, for a lot of products that people are buying on Amazon, they actually go and try it out, take a look at it at different physical store. They may not buy it because this retailer who is having the brick and mortar stores, they don't have a fantastic e-com like you're talking about, Bonobos, where they have like, a full blown associates are aware of it. They are trained to help customer place an order and get items delivered at home.
Yeah.
But like, if these retailers that are closing down had adopted these strategies, I think they would not have to close the store. Maybe the store formats would change. The way they operate will have to definitely change.
I completely agree.
Yeah.
In your book, Ron, you write a lot about how important that in-person experience is and will continue to be even as e-commerce continues to rise in significance and in some ways in particular. So store associates obviously play such an important part in the physical retail experience and that personal connection. So how do you believe the role of associates has or will evolve as buying journeys evolve, and how should retailers adapt?
Yeah. I think for many years, there was not necessarily an integration of technology into the hands of the store associates. And there was, for many years, you would develop, maybe you're calling your clients, it developed into texting and WhatsApp. But the idea of putting technology into sales hands, so that could be chat through a website, that is the multitude of great clienteling apps that are out there and being developed, all the different ways to connect through your brand, through your customer, is really the future of store associates. I think they have to serve multiple purposes today. And the training that is required and the evolution of their skills, for me, is a really important just next step. I think it's taking it from something that could have been quite simple, of let's teaching you how to sell. Today you have to know how to sell and connect, and you do it in person, but you also have to do it digitally. And so that role is so important. That connection to the brand through sales associates is critical. Nothing can replace that. I say that the two most important roles in retail are great store managers, because they always set the tone. Like the person who runs the four walls, no matter what happens in a company, that role of a store manager, whatever that title is for your brand, and great sales teams are the core of great retail. And those two, and you need great back of house, you need ops, you need visual merchandising, you need loss prevention, you need HR, you need all of those things. But if you don't have a great manager, just a great store manager, and the sales team to back it up, maybe it's only two people. Maybe, I ran an Apple store that had 500 people that worked in it. So it scales in very unique ways. But those two roles are critical to our success. And it's part of the reason with the book, like that's the audience for this book. But I think every brand can look and say, you need those two, and invest in those two roles and their development for the success of our industry.
Yeah, Ron, so you think as technology evolved and the digital first companies, digital native companies, starting from Amazon to any of these, they have invested heavily in providing customers with tools, so that they can buy they can buy what they want to buy much more ease. They have like a lot of information about what details about product, and to some extent like how soon I can get, how much is left. So all those fancy experiences that customers are able to get on their website or on the mobile app. But actually this with the store associates, we haven't done enough to provide them similar level of tooling. So when the customer is coming in the store, they have better tools from the same company,
right,
on their phone. But that associate is like working off of a aged point of sale system, that runs on I don't know what kind of technology and has a very dated information.
It's so true. And I think that's my challenge back to the industry, is because what happened in that scenario is they disengaged the sales team and said, we're going to let the customers check out themselves, which is great. There's a reason for that. We're going to let the customer do all the work, the touch screen mirror in the fitting room. So at every point, many brands have chosen to put technology and the customer experience before the sales team. And then I think what happened over the last several years is then the customer's like, yeah, but I just want to talk to someone. I just want to have a human interaction. Let's put all of our technology away and let's have a great experience together. And that's where retail started hundreds of years ago. And I think that's where it is today. It hasn't actually changed. We want to engage, we want to learn, we want to connect, we want to experience a brand and experience a learning something from a stranger, which is really what sales is, and be able to pull all the pieces together. And maybe they walk out with something in a bag, and maybe they don't. And that's okay, because you've learned something today about the brand. And so there is a huge relevance and importance for technology, but there's also a huge importance to just put it away.
Yeah, or give technology to your employees, to your associates, so they can now work better. Like Steve Jobs said, computer is like a bicycle, for human mind.
Yeah.
So basically, provide your employees, associates with the tools so they can even do better. Because something having all that information with them handy will help them to serve the customer even better.
Agreed. Completely agree.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we think that ensuring that store associates are trained on the importance of omnichannel and also the role that they play within the omnichannel customer experience is also so important. Again, from a training perspective, because in talking to retail leaders such as yourself, many have said that they face the challenge of misalignment between their e-commerce and brick and mortar teams. And there's often a competition between these two departments that is detrimental to the customer's experience. And I think a lot of that comes from organizational and departmental fragmentation, also a lack of training. So, what is your opinion, Ron, on how to unify retail organizations to promote customer centricity?
You have to understand what the customer wants first, and don't try to force the customer to do something that they don't want to do. So you're trying to push them into a channel and say, well, this customer's only brick and mortar, this customer's e-commerce, and if I've had this exact experience you're describing, that there's competition between them. And I think today what the world has forced us to do and say, what does the customer want? The customer maybe was a brick and mortar loyalist, became more omni, or became web only. Maybe there's clients who were brick and mortar only and stayed brick and mortar only. Maybe there were e-com only and they became omni after we reopened. So you have to understand what the customer's doing first, and then say, well, great, we have to grow our business. How can we do that to the best of our ability? And so where the struggle can be of that competition is you've lost sight of what the customer actually wants. Learn what they want first, then go back and institute. Maybe you have to put into stores the idea that you earn commission on web sales that you place from a store. Maybe you, which is what I do, maybe you also incentivize them as customers are chatting through the site. You're connecting with the store, that results in a sale. I earn commission on that, so that every touch point becomes omni. That's the future. And so those that have really not integrated this or embraced what the true sense of omni is, are going to struggle, because it will continue to divide the stores and the e-commerce team. And the customer is omni, and we really talk a lot about things just being channelless. People merge between omni, between e-commerce and brick and mortar. It's a constant state of evolution. And CRM data, from my opinion, has never been more important to understand that.
So Ron, we've been talking about Omni for what, 15 years now?
Yep.
Something like that.
Yep.
But not, but still when we go to brands, we still experience this thing, right? Where e-com is e-com, brick and mortar is brick and mortar. Like even today we are talking, and in a certain sense, we are regretting that still we don't have that, that experience, omni experience or the unified experience. There are a few terms that are popular, but all of them means that customer doesn't care. Like, if they only know you as a brand and they think that you are this company, I went to your website or come to your store. For me, it's the one and same thing. So why you're differentiating? So like, what is it that is taking these retailers or these brands to evolve? Like, what is stopping them? What are the difficulties here?
I think the difficulty can be financial, because it does require investment. I think the difficulty can be just leadership and understanding how it all can evolve and merge together. And I will say, traditionally, like department stores and such that have high tenure in their best salespeople, they're not always the easiest to integrate into Omni either. So I won't also say that there's not a willingness, that there's always a willingness on the store side to be Omni. Store teams also want to keep their customers to themselves. So there is definitely a battle, but I think you approach it and say, we're ending 2020. The business has changed. We have to think about what our customer is doing. Where are they? What are they doing? Where are they shopping? What do they need? And how can we serve them best? And almost throw everything away that you've thought about how business should be done and start over. And I can reference, because it's public knowledge, as part of the Gap family of brands, that buy online, pick up in store was was very available for Old Navy. Gap had not even rolled out yet. It was on their long range plan, buy online, pick up in store. At Gap, didn't have that beginning of this year. Every store now has curbside pickup where available and buy online, pick up in store. So you have to move at that speed and say, okay, great, we have to invest here because the world has changed. And where you can make those decisions, spend maybe the money you need to for the future of your business. We have to end this year completely looking at our playbook in a different way.
Yeah, and maybe on the lighter side, but like many of these retailers actually have to pass through the valve of bankruptcy, so they can reinvent themselves and update themselves, right?
It's true, and that's
It's unfortunate, but that's what's happening. Yeah.
There are so many things we could pick your brain on here, Ron, but as we wrap up, I wanted to ask you, every retailer takes a slightly different approach to the customer experience. How would you define customer-centric retailing, and what makes for an excellent customer experience in your view, if you had to summarize it in just a couple of sentences?
Couple of sentences.
Tough.
Tough. There's a part of the book, an important part that I wanted to make sure that people heard, and that in my point of view, the foundation of great retail leadership is really three pillars: empathy, curiosity, and focus. And that no matter what your role is, whether it's part-time stock associate, sales, leadership, multi-store leadership, great customer-centric retail is highly empathetic, because you have to listen and learn and connect. And you do that with your team, you do that with your customer. You need to be highly curious, constantly asking questions of your team, your customer, your product funnel. You have to learn and grow. And this year has taught us more than ever our need to pivot. And the focus, the word is important in our business, because we're constantly barraged by change and by, you open. I say in the book that Saturday was my favorite day, because it always was, because you open the door on your busiest day of the week and you never know what's going to happen. And you could have a long list of things that you want to accomplish, but you need to be focused in order for that to be done. And it's easy to be distracted. So I think of customer centricity as highly empathetic, very curious, and I'm focused. I have a plan for the day with a plan B and maybe a plan C. But that's if those three pillars are not the foundation of how you're doing business, then I think some of the other conversation, it won't happen, because this is a human business at its core, and that's what I love about it.
Absolutely. And I think one of the main takeaways of this conversation for me is that physical retail is certainly not dead. And those personal relationships and in-person interactions certainly still have a very big role to play within the shopping experience overall. We want to thank you so much for your time today, Ron. And we know you're fostering an amazing community of retail professionals through Retail Pride and through your presence online more broadly. So why don't we conclude by telling the audience what's next for you and how they can keep up with you?
Yeah, thank you. So if you go to retailpride.com, I would love for you to just sign up. I'll do probably some blog postings and newsletters and excerpts from the book, a potential podcast next year. So anything you can sign up on there. There's also links on retailpride.com to Amazon, as well as to the publisher that's offering bulk purchase discounted copies, if you think about that for the holiday season or beyond. But for me, what's next is continuing to change the conversation about this industry. It's the voice of this Retail Pride is really necessary. And the feedback I've received in the last month since the book's release is exactly that. Thank you for saying what I've always thought. Thank you for celebrating the hard work. I've been doing this for 20, 30, 40 years. I have a gentleman who was at JCPenney for 50 years and messaged me and said, like no one ever said this before. And now we've retired. I'm like, I'm sorry, I wish I'd done this a long time ago. But we need to keep talking about this and not let the headlines always overwhelm us. So what's next is keeping this growing and moving and sharing this message of gratitude and pride in our industry.
Excellent. Well, your book, Retail Pride, will certainly make a fantastic holiday gift, and we would love to see a podcast from you in the new year.
Thank you. It's a goal. We have to get into the hearts and minds of millions of people, and so I'm trying to find the venue for that.
Absolutely. Well, let's leave it there. And again, a special thank you to our special guest for joining us today, and to our audience. Follow Ron Thurston to keep up with his amazing career and insights into the retail industry.
Thank you.
Hey, Ron, thank you very much. It's been a knowledge-packed 30 minutes. I honestly confess here that I'm going to have to go listen to this podcast a few times to really get, grasp everything that you said. There's a lot you've shared here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. My pleasure.
That's it for this episode of the Customer-Centric Retailing Podcast, featuring our special guest, Ron Thurston. After a long and successful career in brick-and-mortar retail at some of the largest and most prestigious retailers in the world, Ron can say with confidence that physical retail is not dead, that personal relationships are more important than ever, and that every employee within a retail organization should be proud and happy of their careers and the role that they play in this massive, influential industry. If you like what you heard, you can subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Please rate and review and recommend to a friend or fellow retail fanatic. This podcast is brought to you by Hot Wax Commerce.